What's up, everybody? It's JT Sports Match, you guys, with another video. This video, I'm here with my Pittsburgh Steelers 2020 wide receiver position. I'm going to be previewing and breaking down the Pittsburgh Steelers current wide receiver position, and I'm going to be previewing the guys who will end up being the starters, the depth chart, who makes the team, who doesn't make the team. So make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. I upload NFL videos and college football videos daily. And also make sure to follow me on my social media platforms. My Instagram and my Twitter is both JTSports_. The link to those are down in the description down below. You click that little link and it will take you to all my social media platforms. So the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver group is pretty good, right? I think the Steelers have one of the best young wide receiver groups in the NFL. And a lot of these guys are really going to take the NFL by storm. Like, a lot of people don't know, last year, a lot of these guys were supposed to have their breakout seasons last year. But Ben Roethlisberger got injured, and Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges had to come in. And they really held back some of the production of the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receivers. But even then, some of these guys kind of, broke out a little bit last year. So let's start off with Juju Smith-Schuster. Now, I believe that Juju Smith-Schuster is still capable of being a number one wide receiver for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I still have him listed as the number one wide receiver, right? Now, Juju missed a lot of time last season due to injuries. He had 552 receiving yards. He had 42 receptions and 3 touchdowns, right? Now, Juju Smith-Schuster, without a doubt, I believe will bounce back with Big Ben coming back fully healthy. And also, he's in the contract year, right? Now, a lot of people believe that Juju would not take a hometown discount with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if he ends up having a bounce-back season, like a lot of people feel that he will, he could end up demanding Amari Cooper caliber money. And the Steelers, when you look at their current salary cap situation, and also the fact that they have to sign Bud Dupree to a long-term deal, and they also have to sign Cam Hayward, James Conner, and you got to worry about making T.J. Watt the highest-paid player in the NFL. So, I mean, they got a lot of contracts that they got to work out. So, Juju has a bounce-back year. It'll probably vote well for the Steelers this upcoming NFL season, but in the long term, Juju Smith-Schuster, if he bounces back, he'll probably be on the way out. So, I mean, you got Big Ben coming back, and you got Juju being in the contract year for all the reasons why he should have a bounce-back season. Now, at that number 2 wide receiver position, I think Deontay Johnson probably ends up playing that slot receiver position, probably. Most likely, either he plays that other outside wide receiver position on the opposite of Juju, or he ends up playing slot. I think he'll probably end up playing slot, in my opinion. I like him better there. Now, he was pretty much the best receiver on the Pittsburgh Steelers roster last season. He had 680 receiving yards, 5 touchdowns, 59 receptions, and he was targeted 92 times. Now, without a doubt, Deontay Johnson, and a lot of people's minds, was the MVP of the Steelers team last year. I mean, he as a rookie, you don't really see that kind of production. You don't really see a rookie end up taking over that number 1 wide receiver spot instantly as he did and becoming the best player on the offensive side of football. But Deontay Johnson was able to do that. Now, Deontay Johnson is going to break out this year. With Ben Roethlisberger coming back, this guy is going to be in for a very big season. And also, this is going to be his chance to audition, because with Juju Smith-Schuster possibly being in his last year in a Steelers uniform, he probably will most likely be that guy who steps up and fills in for that number 1 wide receiver spot when Juju Smith-Schuster, if he does leave the Steelers in 2021. So when you look at Deontay Johnson, this is a very dynamic wide receiver that has exceptional route running. He can run all the routes that you need him to run on the route tree. And this guy is also very dynamic with the ball in his hands. So Deontay Johnson, without a doubt, is the second best wide receiver on this roster. Now, when it comes to that number 3 wide receiver position, a lot of people aren't really sold on James Washington, but believe it or not, James Washington was really solid last year. He had 735 receiving yards last year. He had 3 touchdowns, 44 receptions on 80 targets, and was averaging 16.7 yards per reception. Now, James Washington is a really good deep threat. Now, James Washington was never brought in to, be the Antonio Brown and things like that. A lot of people keep saying that James Washington is the next Antonio Brown. I don't really see that. James Washington, he doesn't have the route running ability and the things that Deontay Johnson or a guy like Antonio Brown has, but he is a really good deep threat. James Washington was never brought in to be Antonio Brown. He was brought in to be a good deep threat, and that's what James Washington was last year. Now, although he had Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph throwing him the football, James Washington made some really clutch plays last year and some really big moments in the games that a lot of people don't really talk about. So, I mean, James Washington, with Big Ben coming back, you know, Big Ben kind of put James Washington in the doghouse. His first few years in the NFL, kind of called out James Washington a lot. But James Washington last year, I felt James Washington benefited the most with Big Ben not being there, because we really saw what James Washington can do. And the fact that James Washington was able to have the season that he had last year, that bodes well when it comes to playing with Big Ben Roethlisberger. So I think that James Washington being able to, you know, make those big plays down the stretch, those big deep ball catches, which is something that Big Ben really wanted James Washington to do. Which, if you know Big Ben, if Big Ben doesn't trust you, he's not going to trust you to, you know, make those big contested catches, because Big Ben kind of has balls that he just throws it up out of just blind trust for his wide receivers, right? So Big Ben doesn't trust you to make those big grabs and those big moments. He's not going to throw the football. He's going to look elsewhere. So the fact that James Washington was able to step up last year and make those big plays that he was able to do down the stretch last year, I think bodes well for him this upcoming NFL season. Don't sleep on James Washington. James Washington has just a good amount of opportunity to break out as Deontay Johnson has. So don't sleep on James Washington, right? Now you got a position battle here. The position battle to see who's going to end up being that number 4 wide receiver. Now, you got Dionne Cain and you got Chase Claypool. Now, Dionne Cain was brought in, like the middle of the season after the Indianapolis coach parted ways with him. And although he didn't really get a lot of opportunities on the field, when he was on the field, he made a couple of solid plays. Now, Dionne Cain is a guy who I feel is also a pretty okay route runner. He still could use a little bit more development in that department. But Dionne Cain, I think this guy has a lot of potential to be really solid in his Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver position. Now, you also got Chase Claypool, who was the first player of the past NFL draft who the Steelers took. Now, Chase Claypool reminds me a lot of Martavis Bryant. Martavis Bryant was a really big, explosive wide receiver, and he made a lot of big plays down the field, right? And I think Chase Claypool is going to end up being what Martavis Bryant was, probably Martavis Bryant 2.0. Now, the question is, where's Chase Claypool going to start the season out as? Because, you know, rookie wide receivers, you normally don't see rookie wide receivers unless injuries permit and things like that. Normally, you kind of want to ease rookie wide receivers into, you know, roles and things like that. Rookie wide receivers normally come on like the second half of the NFL season for some reason. They kind of start out slow, then they break out, you know, after that week 8, week 9 mark. You get what I'm saying? So, you know, a lot of people easily just want to go ahead and name Chase Claypool a starter. But, I mean, you got to look. He has to beat out Dionne Cain, who I think Dionne Cain is not going to be an easy out. Now, I think Dionne Cain has some potential and has some talent there. He should make the roster. Then, if he overcomes Dionne Cain for that number 4 wide receiver position, then he has to beat out James Washington, right? So, I mean, a lot of people are quick to crown Chase Claypool a starter, but I'm not all that. I want to see what Chase Claypool does in training camp and what he does in the preseason. Now, if he does well and he lights it up, then yeah, he has a good chance of getting on the field and being the starter right away. But I want to see what he does in training camp before we go ahead and name Chase Claypool a starter. Has a lot of potential, but he still needs to work on his route running, and he needs to still work on being able to get off the line of scrimmage, because those were the 2 biggest issues he had in Notre Dame, not being able to consistently get off press and not really having clean releases and route running. If you want to be a Steelers wide receiver and you want to be a starter, you got to be able to do both of those things. You got to be able to be an okay route runner, and even then, if you're not bringing in Chase Claypool to, you know, just run all the routes, and you just want Chase Claypool to just run fly routes and run post routes, that's good and all, but he still has to improve his release if he wants to be able to do that. So Chase Claypool still has a little bit ways to go. Don't sleep on Chase Claypool. A lot of people are really high on him. I believe that Chase Claypool is a sleeper, but I'm not counting on Chase Claypool to come in right away and knock the socks off. You get what I'm saying? So then you got Ryan Switzer. Now, Ryan Switzer, I don't really know if he's going to make the team, because he was like the Steelers slot receiver. He reminds me a lot of Cole Beasley. He kind of has like a Cole Beasley role to him. So Ryan Switzer missed time last season. He was basically the guy who was like the punt returner and things like that. But as we saw, Deontay Johnson was able to fill in that role as the punt returner and really was a lot better than what Ryan Switzer was. So I think we could end up seeing Ryan Switzer end up not making the roster this upcoming NFL season. And I think it's a pretty realistic chance that he doesn't make the roster, because you got Deontay Johnson who's going to be handling those punt return duties, unless Pittsburgh just wants to rest Deontay Johnson and, you know, not want to waste his his stamina and things like that, having to return punts and kicks, and then having to come off after that and, you know, run routes and things like that. So if Ryan Switzer makes the roster, it's basically for his ability to be a returner, because I think we're pretty set at the slot wide receiver position, unless he's just there for depth. Then you got Anthony Johnson. Anthony Johnson was an undrafted rookie free agent from the University of Buffalo from not this year's draft, but the 2019 NFL draft. And I'm really surprised he didn't make a roster last year. So this is another guy who I think has the potential to, you know, maybe he gets a little bit of a spot there and the Pittsburgh Steelers rotational or the Pittsburgh Steelers rotation when it comes to swapping out wide receivers. So don't sleep on Anthony Johnson. He may not make the roster, but I do think he has a good chance of making the practice squad. Then you got Amara Dalbro, you got Quadjay Henderson, and you got C.E. Blacknall. So here's my predictions for the Pittsburgh Steelers depth chart and who makes the roster. Juju's going to be the number 1. Deontay Johnson, number 2 wide receiver, right? Then you got James Washington. He's probably going to be your outside wide receiver. He's going to be wide receiver number 3. At wide receiver number 4, I'm going to go ahead and say that Chase Claypool beats out Dionne Cain, right? Then, at that number 5 wide receiver spot, you got Dionne Cain. Dionne Cain is making this roster one way or another, right? Then, at number 6, you got Anthony Johnson. So, those are the 6 wide receivers who I think ends up making the Pittsburgh Steelers roster. I think Ryan Switzer ends up getting released because, you know, he was basically he was basically in that Cole Beasley role, and he was basically returning punts and things like that. But with, you know, the guys on the roster, we have like a bunch of guys on the roster who should be able to return punts and things like that. So, there's really no reason to still keep Ryan Switzer. So, let me know what you guys think about the Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver position this upcoming NFL season. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel for more NFL videos and content. And thanks for watching.